I would like to now turn it over to Ben and Frank to get into our main presentation. And thank you guys so much for joining us today. We're so excited to have you here. And yeah, I'll turn it over to you guys. You can get right into it.
Brooke, thank you so much. We're both excited, really excited to be here with you, and as excited as I am to kind of tee this up and kick it off. I'm even more excited for the main feature today. My colleague, our VP of Product Management, Ben Harrison, to actually walk us through the model. So what I'm going to do by way of a quick introduction is go through just a few quick slides to kind of tee up the concept. What do we mean when we say Power BI done right, a data-driven approach? So let me know when you can see my screen out there.
I can see it.
I think got it, Frank. Good.
Perfect. Okay. So Power BI done right, a data-driven approach. What does that mean? We want to provide a little education today, folks, and really help you hopefully come away with a better understanding as to what it means when you hear the term be data-driven. I have a lot of folks out there I know, they download Power BI, they start writing a report, and in their minds, we're using Power BI, we are data-driven. We're here to educate you on really the depth behind that a bit more, what it means to be properly set up to be data-driven, and then better leverage the great tool that Power BI is. So I'm going to go through just a few quick slides here, and then Ben will really excite us. So if I can get into advance. Our data journey, this is what we see with many companies and many clients I've worked with on their data maturity, data-driven journey. The first stage is traditional reporting. We get our JD Edwards, we get our NetSuite systems up. What do? We run reports out of those systems. That's how we do our reporting. Then many companies continue to evolve up that chain, that journey, and start exporting data to Excel or using tools like Crystal Reports or SQL Service Reporting Services, SSRS, Microsoft tool. Well, now you've empowered reporting a bit more, but there's certainly more to go. And then we move further up that chain into data visualizations. As they say, when you visualize data, you'll see trends that you often didn't know were right in front of you when you're looking at row and column kind of text-driven reports. So that's a big improvement. And then we move up this chain, and this is where companies are just starting to head towards now, leveraging machine learning and artificial intelligence through tools in Azure, like, again, Power BI. But right in this critical stage here, when we want to leverage something like the visualization tool, again, Power BI, first we need to take a look at where our data resides, how our data is set up, and what we should do to put that data in the best format for reporting, for data security, for trusting in the data and good data governance. And the other thing is bringing data in, for example, from other data sources. So what we mean, and when we're talking about that, the example here is your golf score and Power BI data sets. What do they have in common? Well, less is more. You want your number to be as low as possible. Not a big golfer, but I think the golfers out there can hopefully resonate with that. Here's the point. I download Power BI. It's a cool tool. I start writing a report. Let's say I write 6 reports in my general ledger. I now have created 6 mini little data sets. And then if I write reports in my sales, AR, AP, multiply that times X reports, that's how many little separate sets of data I'm managing. In other words, if I have a measure, a calculation that resides in this AP report, these 2 GL reports, and over here in another report, chances are if I want to alter that or change it or add to it, I have to open up each one and make my changes. It becomes unwieldy to manage. Whether that's Power BI or Excel for that matter, same kind of issue. So we want to take this a little bit further and transform your data. So what we're talking about is this magic blue cube, which is meant to represent an information engine. In our case, it's called Quick Launch. That's the engine we provide for JD Edwards and NetSuite. And what does that do? If you look at your ERP, JD Edwards or NetSuite, your data is optimized for transactional processing. So that means when I hit post, it doesn't take 2 days. When I want to, process a bunch of journal transactions, it can do it effectively. It does not mean it's set up optimized for reporting. So in a strong data model, you're taking data in from that ERP, and most of our clients don't live in a vacuum. Not everything is in JD Edwards or NetSuite. You might have a separate CRM system, purchasing system, what have you, estimating system. It could be anything. But I want for true corporate reporting, from one place to bring data in from all of those sources. And now I'm managing one library of my data, easier to secure, easier to govern, most importantly, easier to create reports off of. And then finally, in that example I made, if I mentioned, if I have a measure, a calculation, maybe a cost to complete or earned revenue to date, and I want to alter that, I change it, or I want to add a new measure, a new calculation. Change it here, I validate it one place. It's going to propagate those changes out to any of the Excel, Power BI, or SSRS reports that are calling that measure. Now, today we're going to focus on Power BI, but just realize the other tools like Excel can be leveraged equally as well once you have transformed data in a well-governed data model. So what that really leads to, here's a visual trying to explain what that data model, really looks like. So in one data model, you might have all of your modules, your GL, AP, AR, purchasing, and the like. And then you have all your different measures and KPIs, as of agings, which are not for the faint of heart if you've ever tried to write a report with a moving target like an as of aging. Last 12 months, month to date, revenue, gross profit, and so forth. And then I have the dimensions. That's how I might want to slice that data, work order, business unit, company. And finally, one of these cubes might be feeding data in from another data source, like our CRM, as I mentioned. So now I'm managing just that one library of detailed transactions to run my reporting. And on our team, folks, I can just tell you, we get so pumped up and excited when we see a client go from where they are, the light bulbs come on and they're successfully data driven and are never going to look back. This is how our team celebrates. So we are always excited to talk to you about data and help any way we can. And with that, Ben, I probably spoke too long. I get excited. Please do take it away.
Well, thanks, Frank. And you know I get excited too. And you'll tell I'm excited when I start speaking too fast. Frank, I think you need to stop sharing for me to grab the screen.
Okay.
I think that's true.
I think I can hit stop. Try it now.
Okay, now I'll try it. Let's try it. Share screen. I want to share screen number 2. All right, so thanks, Frank. What I wanted to start with is we look at that cube, that data model, and our PowerPoint, it's blue, so we call it the blue cube. And I just want to kind of talk about what that means. And I'm looking today at primarily a JD Edwards-based cube, but the exact same principles are true whether it's JD Edwards or any other ERP. That's really the...
Ben, are you sharing your screen?
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
I mean, you look fantastic, but I know you want to show us.
Well, I did put on my best shirt today, so thanks for saying so. Yeah. So this, I want to talk about that blue cube again. I'm going to be talking about JD Edwards here, but it's true about any other ERP system. We're in the Power BI eco set. Right now, I've got Power BI Desktop open. That's a free tool. If you've not downloaded it, you can get it right away from Microsoft. And I think they're really clever in giving it away because once you start using it, you're going to want to use it more. Mm-hmm. It's a very user-friendly tool. It really is a game changer in who can create reports. And in your company, really doesn't have to be an IT-centric thing anymore. It's particularly if IT is governing, a data set. You really can allow more people to start making reports. So I'm going to start with looking at the general ledger portion of that cube. And in here, I've got this central kind of numbers table. I'll open that in a minute, but it's surrounded by dimensions. And one of the primary dimensions that people care about in finance, of course, would be, the account table. So if I go and click here, and we've concatenated, so you got object account, you got description, but if I want both of them at once, I can click that, and quickly I get, here's my object and accounts. So I might be looking at that. Maybe I want to do a quick trial balance. So the next thing I might go to is the number table. So this is the fact table. That's what we like to call it. And in here, I've created all sorts of pre-built measures. And this is what comes in that cube. The point about that is I don't have to know a lot about joins and relationships between tables to start building a report. I can just say, well, I want actual amount inception to date, which is what I'd care about if I wanted a balance sheet, an income trial balance. And I'll explain why it's blank here right now. But while I'm clicking things here, I might as well go ahead and get actual amount prior year inception to date. So you can see that I've got that, it kind of makes sense, actual amount PYITD. So now I've got 2 measures in there, but I've got no data. The reason being is we've got this calendar built into it. And that's a really important part to your analyzing your data, the time-based nature of it. And I'll show you how that feature works out. But I need to pick a calendar element to it. Our calendar has a built-in, Gregorian calendar, fiscal calendar, so I can look at it both ways. But if I was maybe looking at a year period, I then came down here and picked a year and period that I cared about. Maybe it's period 19 from 2019, period 12. Now all of a sudden I've got that data. So very quickly, people can start kind of doing their own questions, doing their own inquiries, because the tool is user-friendly and the data is governed and controlled. That's the whole point about that kind of that blue cube, is it provides, lets IT do what they do really well, but then hands off a lot of the self-service question answers to people in individual departments, whether it's finance or operations. I'm not going to build a whole full report here, but you change things to slicer, so I can start doing drop downs and drill throughs and lots more fun things to do with reports that I won't belabor here because we've got other reports to pick and choose from. But as you start looking at things, you can start turning things into a stacked column chart, clustered column chart. You can start doing a stacked, and there's a number of ways to start using the visualizations here. Just if you're not familiar with Power BI, once I've created a report and I like it, I can publish it, and this will publish it to the Power BI service. And that's where I'm going to go to next. So just a little bit of talk about that data model, that blue cube, and this is what we're at, that GL portion.
If I just may double check, interject, and confirm with you, if you open up that GL balance detail folder for a moment, it's true, right, that all those subfolders are pre-written measures that in a well-governed data model, they're already there for you to use, as opposed to having to write those formulas at report creation time. Is that
exactly
accurate?
Exactly correct. So we've gone through and kind of came up with a couple hundred out-of-the-box measures that are most common. You're going to want to add to these. The methodology of how you create this is very consistent, so it's easy to expand your model to new elements. But if you're looking at revenue, you care about revenue month to date, quarter to date, prior year. You might care about your budget revenue, right? Or you might care about variances of revenue to this year to last year. So the idea that I not only want last year's number and this year's number, but I want the difference between those two, and maybe the percentage of the difference between those two, because that's where analytics is powerful, is in those nuances of not just absolute values, but percentages, and percentage changes over time. And so thank you for clarifying that, Frank.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you.
I'm going to hop over to the Power BI service right now and start looking about what happens when you've built out a lot of reports that are more robust, if that makes sense, hopefully. And so let me shrink this window down and this window down and pull up my Power BI service here. Sorry, I meant to have this already open, but it doesn't take any time to get into Power BI. It's very, very quick.
Well, I think you wanted to show people how they log in, so that was perfect.
Oh, that'd be good. Thank you. So I'm logged in right now to the Power BI service. This is this is me. I've logged in. So what that means is when you're using Power BI, you can set up your governance here, right? So I can say, what can I see in here? I might see different things than Frank sees, but I have different workspaces. So this is how you organize and structure it. And that's another thing that's important in setting up Power BI when it's done right, is consider how your service is configured. How do you set up your workspaces? How do you grant access to those workspaces? How do you control the content within those workspaces? Is something you really want to consider carefully. So I'm going to start by looking quickly just at a particular workspace is called, I think, our demo, corporate demo. Let me get to the right one. I've got a lot of spaces, workspaces. So corporate reports. So what happens is you create a workspace and there's a lot of content in here. And this is another point about Power BI done right. You're going to want to think about how you group these and what reports belong to it. But the workspace is primarily a place to collaborate on creating content. And I might have that GL report that I published, right? So if I was out here and I'd published this GL report from the desktop tool, and it might have lots of nice pages on it. In the Power BI world, a report is collections of pages about a single subject. So I might have this, report on these nice metrics. It looks like I've got a gross profit problem. So the other thing you'll find as you look at Power BI is how do you use the visualizations correctly so that they have the most impact? And so in this case, you might use these type of cards to quickly identify areas that you want to look into. I might want to look into expenses year to date. I've got a quarter to date. I've got maybe it's red. Why is that true? Another element of this report is the time-based part of it. So if I pick on this revenue tab, one of the things I might really care about is year to date. I'm looking at that year to date, and I've got, in this case, year to date and prior year to date. But that time-based element of the calendar allows me to quickly say, well, what's that month to date? And this is important to me. I did analytics for a company for 18 years, and I see different things when I look at month to date versus quarter to date versus year to date. And the idea that I can have one report that allows me to slice and dice the data at those different levels. And what's more is when I adjust it, I get the response quickly, allows me to have more depth to my analysis. So think about Power BI done right as being, how am I getting people to use Power BI to get insights into my business? And that's going to be the ability to quickly toggle and slice and dice through the data. So month to date, quarter to date, year to date, that's all part of that calendaring function, so I can quickly see those trends over time. I want to jump down here to the expenses tab. Another thing, again, these are all reports that we've built over time, but I might start figuring out, how do I best use the right visual for the right job? We find that waterfall charts are really good at variances. So what I've done here is I've got an expense variance by categories that I've set up. In this case, if I hover over employee expense, I actually get a lot more detail there. So the other part about Power BI done right is use the tooltips. This is the tooltip functionality. So not only do I know that I'm, almost $600,000 over expenses variance from last year, I can actually see what is my actual amount, what was my budget, what was last year's, and what is that variance. So that gives context to the number. It's not just one number I care about. It's actually how that relates to the other numbers. It's important. So use tooltips when you're doing Power BI. Another element here is the ability to drill down. So if I say, well, why am I over budget there? I actually need to be able to drill down into the details. In this case, I've drilled down to the actual object account, the description, and ultimately the answer to what's wrong is in the drilling through the transactions. So Power BI done right, again, is not that I have one report and then I have to go run to another report for the details, but that I'm able to take the summary data and drill down till eventually I drill through. And the drill through is where I'm going to find what went wrong, what didn't get posted right, what didn't get reversed, what was coded from a category code element. And now I can start getting the why. The why, my belief is that every time you answer a question, it actually leads to another question. And that's really good analytics, something that drives you like, why do I keep on forgetting to reverse my entries? That's the business process improvement you're going to get out of getting down to the details. Another element of getting to the details that I think is important is because
before you leave that one screen, I'm so sorry. It piques my curiosity, because to complete the picture, is that web URL on the far right where an actual scanned document can be?
Yes, thank you, Frank. And I didn't drill into an example with that, but
that's
you can actually create links to documents that would, if I wanted to see what this journal entry was or what this invoice was, I can have a link to take me to the image of that, particularly if my images are stored in some sort of web location that's accessible.
Didn't mean to interrupt. I just got excited about that.
No, thank you. I welcome it. So thinking about this detail that I got the answer to why, but having that detail available to me gives me confidence in my analysis, because as you get to be more and more data driven and you're using Power BI more and more, you need to trust the data. And you can trust the data because in every case, I'm not just seeing a number here that I don't know where it came from. I can drill down to where that source came from And now when we're working on it and we're resolving problems, we can get a lot more accurate, a lot more specific, right? We know really what's going on and we trust that data. So that's kind of an idea about how a report might work. I want to jump from this workspace view in Power BI to the app. So again, Power BI done right means that you're going to kind of create an area where I create reports. Maybe Frank and I are collaborating on this report. And when we're ready and done with this report, we're going to eventually want to put it in a place where people can see it and use it. And so what that means is I'm going to create an app that has been built into the Power BI service is this idea of apps. And so I'm going to I would go and say, update the app. I won't do that right now, but I'm identifying which reports go into the app. And if I go to the app for that workspace, I can come up here and say, well, here's that corporate JDE app. That's the one we were just looking at. And here is the some of those reports. One of the things that's I think is really cool in Power BI is the idea that there can be a dashboard that brings data in from multiple sources, right? So in this case, I've got general ledger data, and if I go and click on this, it's going to take me to the general ledger report. I might have AP data or inventory data or procurement data or sales data. And each one of these, I can look at my enterprise, maybe in the morning overall, and say, I'm going to have to go look at sales sometime today. There's something wrong there. Or accounts payable I've got. So this is the idea of the umbrella view of my business. So I understand what needs attention today. If I do go to the general ledger where we've already been, this is that same report we're looking at a little bit earlier. I get to that exact same data. This is not a different copy of the data. We're always looking at one. That blue cube we talked about is this one version of the data. No matter what report I'm using, I'm looking at the same data set. So again, very effective from a governance point of view. And I won't go through the same drill down capabilities, but that's this again, the exact same report. Hopefully that makes sense. Another way to use that time-based capability, what I think is pretty compelling, is in their KPIs. Many companies are trying to manage their business at a big KPI level. You're looking at current ratio, maybe inventory turns, days receivable. You want to compare how you're doing over time, and maybe even want to compare how you're doing to industry standards, right? What's a good value for the industry? You might start looking at that. But if I notice here, my days receivable is 42.1, that's just right now. What I really need to know more about that is some context over time. What has it been and which direction is it going? So that time-based element of that blue cube allows me to say, okay, here's my 42.1, and I'm red though, because a year ago, last year, as 38.1, right? So the idea is that I can now look at my trends over time, and not only am I worse than a year ago, but I'm worse than maybe a budget or a forecast or a target that I wanted to have. So the nature of that is I can look at this trend over time. I can look for seasonality. I can see, well, maybe every summer it always goes up and every winter it comes down. Where am I at on that seasonal curve? In this case, this blue line is my trend for the last 6 months, and it's been getting worse and worse every month. Why? Well, days receivable is really just a ratio of net sales and accounts receivable. And what I can see is that my sales is slowly declining over time, and my receivables is slowly increasing over time. Hence, I'm getting worse and worse. So unless I do something different, I can expect the next dot to be even higher still. That's the idea of the context or the value of not only measuring this as an important metric in my company, but understanding the direction it's going and maybe start looking for actions I can take to improve that particular measure.
What I love about how you do this is this really illustrates the bigger story behind the snapshot KPI, basically. So
yes.
You can really see a more complete picture. And Ben, I'm just mentioning this for verification because I think we have a few of our Vista friends out in the audience. You mentioned JDE NetSuite. This is also exactly the same for Viewpoint Vista, just to confirm with you.
Yeah, the principles we're talking about in creating this consolidated data set, again, what we're calling a blue cube, just to make it simple, that applies no matter what, right? Any sort of a system that you want. And we like ERPs. ERPs are pretty consistent in having a general ledger, APAR, probably sales and inventory. But it applies to CRM, right? So opportunities and leads. You still want to be able to create this sort of a structured data set that you're governing and caring for while you're giving people the power of Power BI to start looking at analyzing their data, right? So that's to me, Power BI done right is now I'm giving a Power BI-like tool with this deep analytics to end users who can start solving their own what then, what if, why is this? And getting those questions is where you're going to get the big improvements in your business that it's going to lead to insight, and then insight leads to profitability.
Thank you, Ben.
These are all great questions, and stop me if you know that I get excited and go off the rails sometimes.
That's
I
good.
do want to, we've been talking about Power BI and visualization, and we believe visualization is the way of the future. You see things you wouldn't see otherwise if you're using visualizations, but there's times in your business when you still need to have a pixel perfect paginated report, something to print out to give to your bank or your surety, or somebody who needs to see this information. And so probably not apparent to everybody, but you can build in those pixel perfect reports within the Power BI platform as well. They're called paginated reports. In this case, I've got an income statement. Our data model has a good hierarchy. It's got a balance sheet hierarchy and income statement hierarchy that allows me to go from revenue, maybe to what type of revenue am I looking at. If I'm looking at revenue, I might say, well, it's store sales. If I look at store sales, I eventually get to the accounts that make up store sales. And if I click on that, I drill into a report that brings me those details. So again, the point about this is looking at the exact same blue cube. This is not a copy of the blue cube. This is not another version of the data.
Right.
So whether I look at it through the Power BI lens or through a paginated report lens, I'm going to get the same number as long as if I'm talking about revenue for this month for this account. In this tool, Frank would get if he's in Power BI report. And I'll emphasize that one more time later on. We'll look at Excel real briefly. One of the things we said is using Excel for what Excel does best. And there's some really good things about Excel. It's a wonderful analytics tool. It's a terrible database. And so we don't want to take away from Excel. We want to make Excel look good at what it does best. So that paginated reports are something you want to keep in mind. You will need them. Every company needs them. But you don't need to have a whole different tool to create Power BI, to create paginated reports. It can be part of the same system that's being set up here in that blue cube.
And accessing the same data as well, which is key.
Right, exam data. I do want to point out a few things here that I think are pretty interesting that are part of the Power BI platform that you want to start considering using. I want to subscribe. So this would be true of any report here. I'm on a paginated report. I used to be in charge of distributing reports at the company I worked at. It was a real one of those tasks that I did not enjoy very much. Getting the right report to the right person at the right time. People move, they wanted a new report. So the idea that everyone can subscribe on their own as they want to, or I can subscribe for people. But Power BI has a great distribution methodology using subscribe. So consider using that if you're going to start using Power BI. I think you'll find it saves, again, a self-service subscription. So getting out of the managing it and giving that into the hands of people is important. And another thing that Frank and I like to play with is this idea of comment, right? So sometimes you got a question about a report, what's going on here. So I might come here and say at Frank DiLorenzo, I could say, thanks for the hard work. Or I might ask a question about why, and of course it'd be better if I could type, but I'm not a
Ben, that's the first time you said a positive, nice one. Thank you so much.
Well, you're welcome.
I'm going to watch this.
You do work hard, so I should be more positive more often. But what I've seen is this happens really well in maybe accounts receivable element where, you know what, I should plug my.
I thought that was mine, Ben. I just jumped to my cord, but to Ben's point, he just sent that notification. It just popped up on my phone right away, and I can now click on it. I don't know how easily you can see it, but I'll try. It is opening up the same report that Ben was looking at. And when it opens, I will see his comment and I can reply. I don't know if, yeah, here comes that report.
Yeah. So again, Frank, where I've seen this happen really well is on the, like a receivables report, where I'm about to go into the 60-day column or the 90-day column, and I want to ask, when are we going to collect this money? We used to write that down on a piece of paper, a paper report, right? So next month, when you're looking at a report, you're looking at two. You're saying, well, it's still in the zeros. What did we say last month? And so managing that on paper versus managing that on a place like this. Next week, when I come here and I look at this and it's still going to be the same number, all my comments and your replies are going to be here within this report, so that I can look at that over time. So again, very powerful. Again, another part about Power BI done right is expand how you're thinking about using Power BI. It's a collaboration tool. It's a report distribution tool. It's a analytics and get answers tool. So again, lots of things that you could do with this that are kind of compelling.
Yeah.
One last thing in this workspace that I want to emphasize, and I'm going to look at this documentation report here. So we've been talking about kind of the blue cube and what it looks like and how it's built. And we've been looking specifically at general ledger, right? And so that's general ledger, and this little cube is this little dot represents that actual amount inception to date, prior year, the revenue month to date, quarter to date, year to date, the variance between that. All those are defined in here at one time. You can see there's 730 measures sitting within that general ledger. So a lot of content, and you're going to want to build out all this content so your end users have the answers that they want to start slicing and dicing. That's surrounded by these dimensions. But that's one little cube in that bigger blue cube set that Frank was talking about. Mm-hmm. The real cube is this, right? So think about your data set, your company. This is the umbrella of everything you want to start looking at. The beauty of this is that sometimes I might want to look at an accounts payable report that looks at inventory detail, that looks over purchase orders, and looks over sales, because I'm worried about, if I want to make a sale, do I have the inventory to make the product? Am I receiving the material that I need to feed that? But the point about this is those are very different data sets, but I can create reports across those because I have common dimensions. So the dimensions you do one time, one customer, one vendor, one employee, one parts master. And so now I can start doing cross-module reporting to extend the insight I'm going to get into my enterprise that I wouldn't otherwise do easily. These become very complicated things, but again, they're possible because when you build that one blue cube, build it big. Think big in that data set, because Power BI is powerful enough to give you insight that you hadn't dreamt of before. So that maybe that's the mantra that I would live with is most people are creating too small of a vision for what's possible, and Power BI can handle more than that.
So Ben, right there, when you have the full model open, the measure count I see is 2011. So
yes.
Just to illustrate to the audience, the attendees, that means there's 2011 pre-built calculations or measures in the model, and you even have insight, I believe, you don't have to go there if you don't want to, in the documentation as to how those are built. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's true. Yeah, and I would need to go down to a different report.
You don't need to. I mean, I just wanted to point it out. Oh, well, look at how good
this is how those are built, and then it's a specific type of language. So actually having the context of how these are built is very useful. Every customer we've ever had wants to add more. You start with 2011, but you're going to want 2,500 before you know it. And so you need to be able to take what exists and extend it on. And that's what that's part of the beauty of making a carefully structured model, is that it's very extensible, and no one stops at 2,000. I've never seen that. Everyone wants more, which is important. You need that to run your business. The last thing that I want to kind of emphasize, and I mentioned I do there, is using Excel for what it is best. And so I do have an Excel spreadsheet pulled up, and I haven't connected to the whole model. I connected to the portion of that model to the GL, but just to emphasize, what we talked about. If I come to the account list, I go to these fields, I bring in the same field I did before, and my first sample, I brought in object, account, and description. And you know what? I let my system go to sleep. So the first time I click that, it goes to sleep. And I go and say, well, bring in my actual amount, inception to date, and actual amount, inception to date, and prior year, inception to date. And I still go back and say, well, let's bring in the calendar field for the year period that I had before. And I pick a year period. What I'm getting is the exact same answer that I got through the other one, through the Power BI. And again, the thought is now, these relationships, this model is built here. So what people have always done before is they downloaded a bunch of that data into Excel, and they might have 8 tabs of data here, and they got some really fancy connections to VLOOKUP here, so you can get the objects on the one table and the descriptions on another table, but I want to combine them here. And what you end up with is a beautiful piece of programming that if I built it, I'm the only one in the world who knows how it works. If Frank built it, he's the only one. When he goes on vacation, no one can fix his spreadsheet. And so Excel, from a pivot table point of view, is fabulous as a tool. Slicing, dicing, using Excel to slice and dice through a governed data set is wonderful. But you need to do it that way. All the data that I'm looking at here is sitting in that blue cube, the same blue cube that we touched for paginated reports or Power BI reports. When I email this report, this spreadsheet to Frank, it doesn't have 10 tabs of data in it. It's not 20 megabytes big. It's probably 30 kilobytes big. So again, the logic's elsewhere, but it's a great tool for slicing and dicing. And that's what we would say is use Excel still. It's a wonderful tool, but use it for what it does well. Don't try to make it into a data set, database creation tool. It's something that is unsustainable and will lead you into trouble. So that's kind of my big overview of this, using Power BI right. What's it look like when it's done well? Frank, do we have any questions that have been coming up? Or
we do actually, and so I was hoping you'd ask because I want to make sure we can cover them. So are you ready?
Yeah.
Is your transactional detail showing the F0911 information, and is that detail loaded into your AAS?
So I'm sorry, repeat that question.
Is your transaction detail showing the F911, F0911 information? The GL.
Yes, it is. Yeah. Right. So it is. The GL is actually more complicated answer to that. Is it can be all based on 9/11. What we find most companies want to do is maybe say take the last 2 years from the 9/11 and maybe the previous 20 years from the 902, because I might not care about the details on the 902 from 20 years ago, but I still need to have that for historical trending. But so you can balance that and decide how much detail, how much summary, and but those are the tables we're bringing.
Very good. And it says, is that detail loaded into your AAS? I'm not sure what that is, but if that means our data model, the answer is yes, correct?
Yes.
Okay. It seems quick to be able to generate BI reports once the data is set up and available, in this case to the JDE source, but what's the effort to do that first and ensure you have clean data, et cetera? And I'm just going to take a first high level bit and then let you give the more detailed answer. But I would say right out of the gate, that's where if you can partner with a company that has done that heavy uplift and has done that effort, then you work with that company to implement that model. And part of that process would be validation of the data. Now, clean data, it's an interesting point. We've had clients say they didn't really know where to clean up their data till they looked at it through the lens of Power BI and visually could see where their data had holes. Then they started the correction process. But if you work with a team that's already built a data model like this, your implementation time is weeks, as opposed to trying to build all of this, which, easily months, more likely 18 to 24 months. Now, Ben, please add to or correct anything I say.
Yeah, I do think it does help to have done this well before, because there's a lot of snafus you can do. And so we have customers who have tried to build their own and eventually realize that time to value, you cannot build this cheaper than you can buy it. So find someone you can buy a data model from. Is obviously self-serving, but really is, I think, a good recommendation. If you start adding new data, so let's say you had a data model and you thought, now I want to bring in something else that needs to merge that. Obviously, that's a tremendously variable thing. If you've got a methodology, though, and you've defined exactly the steps you need to do, what we find is that adding small additional perspectives, new, like we added quality at one place, or a new version of transportation, that's usually about a 40-hour effort on the average. It could be much more than that. It could be somewhat less. But again, once you've built that blue cube first, you have a structure and a methodology that is extensible. Yep. And so the first setup is complicated. The additional things are fast. Hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you, Ben. And they just keep coming in. You ready for more?
Yeah.
What are the components of Power BI? Are you using the desktop product? Does GSI provide the Blue Cube data model? And does that model come already built? As much as I'm dying to answer, Ben, I'll let you take that one.
Yeah, so this, the first part is we do use all three components. The desktop tool, free, is great. It's the best authoring tool. Microsoft's trying to make this service be as good of an authoring tool as the desktop, but it's not yet. So we use the desktop to author reports. We publish to the service. Then the service is where we do the kind of content management part of this work. And then obviously you're going to use your phone for the apps. Frank showed that example. So your phone or your tablet. So we use all three major components of Power BI. Frank, what's the second part of that question?
Does GSI provide the Blue Cube data model? And I would say they do by extension through us as their valued partner. So we provide that at Preferred Strategies, and we partner with GSI to work with their clients.
Yeah.
And then Ben, does it come already built? If you want to just address that.
Yeah, it does. So we find that the reason we actually first built our model is we found that we're writing income statement reports and find out that most, every company has a distinct thing about their income statement or their balance sheet, but in many ways they're similar, right? You've got current assets, you got long-term assets, you've got revenue, you got cost of goods sold, you got G&A. So the actual building it is very repetitive. So the Blue Cube is pre-configured. That's why we can install it and configure it in 10 weeks at a company or 8 weeks at a company, depending on which system we're talking about. Right. And there's a lot of basic functions that are built into that Blue Cube. So
excellent. Thank you, Ben. Let's get another one. Does your Blue Cube account for tracking history on changes in the category codes, or does it only hold values that exist in JDE from the last time you pulled data into the Blue Cube? For example, on the business unit table, the F0006 table.
Yeah, that's a very good question. So the company I worked for, we used JD Edwards, and what we did is created a snapshot functionality. We created a 550006 that we would run every month because we were looking at changes in business unit category codes. We were a construction company, so there's jobs that are business units, and you change project managers. You want to know who's the project manager, last month or 2 months ago. And so this is a long answer to yes, we can build that slowly changing dimensions into the Blue Cube. We probably would recommend, instead of trying to build that into the Blue Cube, you build that in the JD Edwards space into a 55 table. That's maybe a copy. It's ideally situated for that from the setup. And then you can build the model. The Blue Cube can look at that 55 table to get the slowly changing dimensions.
And Ben, just as a point of interest, the company you were with, implemented Quick Launch on JD Edwards. Did that company not migrate to the Viewpoint Vista?
Yeah, we did. So I worked for that company 18 years, really enjoyed it. It's great work. We moved from JD Edwards into Vista, Viewpoint Vista for, too many reasons to talk about here. But What we did do then is, I was a customer of Preferred Strategies at the time. We used them to do a bunch of work. And I went to the company and said, I think you should build one of these for Vista. And another company did the same. So that's how we've migrated from JD Edwards to Vista to NetSuite, as people like this methodology. And once you've used it, you don't want to go back.
Yeah, Ben, I think it's a very powerful statement when you meet a company that is more willing to change their entire ERP. I always say no one wakes up one day and says, let's change our accounting system. That'll be fun. Let's do that. But we had a couple of companies that were resided in the fact they needed to change their ERP for all the reasons they had internally, but they were not willing to give up their data analytics platform. That was something they did not want to do. So I think that's pretty powerful in itself. Another question, Ben, what JDE modules are included with the standard Blue Cube?
Oh, okay. So that's, again, I'll go back to this perspective summary, because that really actually kind of outlines the JD Edwards one. And there's different ones for NetSuite and different ones for Vista. But again, I've got the JD Edwards one. But so out of the box, we're including these. I think there's 21 or 22 of them. You know, probably the newer ones are quality. We've added, I apologize, there's one missing here. We've added a transportation module that's not in this sample data set. So you think APAR, the basic ones of manufacturing, sales, inventory, GL, purchasing. Then some people want shipment. Work orders are really important, and particularly in a manufacturing world. So this is kind of the list. We do find that obviously there's many more JD Edwards modules, and that's, you know, the individual companies want things added, and that's what we're saying is you can add more data to this model. We can help you add that. We can teach you how to add it yourself. But you will add data to this model either within JD Edwards or out of other data sources, because nobody works only with one system.
Hey, Ben, as the VP of product, it's fair to say we're continuing to add even within the modules, right? Didn't we recently release, I want to say, unit of measure and multi-currency conversions?
Yeah. So we've got a multi-currency, we've got unit of measure conversion. So all those are kind of additions that we've always been able to do that on the GL, but adding some of those other elements on the sales or the inventory have been really, really helpful to our customers.
All right, I've got two more questions for you, and I'm being mindful and respectful of everybody's time, but I'm loving the questions. For this sample you're using, what kind of Power BI license are you using? I know Pro licenses cap their data model import to 10 gigabytes. So is this data model we're seeing less than 10? And if not, are you using a direct query mode in Power BI?
Well, we're using a premium data set, premium per user. About a year, it was a year and a half ago, Microsoft previously had only premium capacity. So essentially a company needed to essentially spend about $5,000 per month for this premium capacity. And we were then deploying models in an SSAS server. When they came out with premium per user, $20 per user per month, essentially from a price point, you can't duplicate that functionality outside for that price point. So for most companies, unless you're very, very big, we're recommending the premium per user capacity. It gives you, 40 data refreshes a day. It gives you, I think, 100 gigabytes total. We've not yet found a company where premium per user was inadequate, but the benefits you get out of premium per user are so much better than pro that it's just worth it. You need to upgrade from pro to premium to get some of the additional functionality that the model should have.
Thank you, Ben. And then, does Power BI use SQL-based queries?
Power BI has multiple elements to it. So Power BI by itself, if it was just using Power BI desktop, it's going to want to use M queries, and that's the Power Query Editor. M is a great programming language. Fewer people understand it. Our methodology is primarily doing data transformation using SQL, Microsoft SQL, T-SQL. But M is possible, and we do some transformations using M occasionally, particularly in the calendar. But then the language of the measures, the things we're saying month to date, quarter to date, year to date, that type of language is called data analytics expressions. The actual, it's DAX, DAX is what people refer to it as. And it's a distinct language, completely different. It's exceptionally powerful. The base level is very straightforward, but it has nuances that make you allow you to do things that make your jaw drop. And so you can start in the dabbling in DAX world and get interested in it, but you're going to eventually want to have a lot more knowledge about what's possible, because I am impressed with what DAX can do.
Thank you so much, Ben. And Brooke, I'm noting the time. I think we can turn it over to you for any final GSI commentary or follow-up if you'd like. And I don't see any other questions in the panel at this point. Some really good questions, folks. I want to thank everybody out there for those. It's always more enjoyable. We have some good questions to dialogue around. But Brooke, anything that you want to wrap up with?
No, I feel like this was a really good, this was awesome. Thank you guys so much. We really appreciate you being here, and Ben and Frank both. And we definitely value our partnership with you. And I think everyone else here got a lot out of this today. So thank you for doing that for us and being such a good partner for us.
Thank you, Brooke. And the exam, to see how everybody paid attention, will be sent out shortly. Please complete that.
There is a survey after this. So yes, as soon as this closes, you will have a survey pop up. If you could just take that for us, that's just a little thank you, for providing all this information. It'd be great if you guys could do that for us today. And as it is getting closer to 3, I think we'll wrap it up here. And are there any final thoughts, anything you guys would like to say?
Just appreciate our partnership with GSI, and thank you for the opportunity to meet. And thank you to all the attendees that took an hour of their day to meet with us. We really appreciate it. Ben?
No, you can tell I love talking about this. Yeah. So if you want to know more, or you just want to chat about what's possible, this is fun for us.
100%. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Brooke, Maddie, Ben. Thank you so much. And everybody have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, guys. Have a great one.
Bye. Thank you.